Hey, my name is Rusty Korhonen, and I've got a story for you. Well, back in 2016, I traveled with my father to Finland. It was the trip of a lifetime. We flew into Helsinki. We spent some time there. We went to Turku to visit the Suomen Joutsen and donate a photo album my grandfather had put together. And we took a flight up to Rovaniemi and spent some time in Kitale, did some fly fishing, and did a road trip across the Lapland. And all those stories are below if you'd like to listen or watch. But our last day in Kitale, we decided to leave early because we wanted to do some shopping in Rovaniemi. I really wanted to buy a couple of really good Finnish pukkos. I've owned a couple in the past, and I just love the knives the Finns make. The ones I like are the high carbon steel and the ornate wooden handles. And there's a couple different brands that I like, and I wanted to do some shopping just to make sure I could get a good one. And my dad thought that was a good idea too. So on our way down, we stopped in Santa's village. Santa does live in Rovaniemi, right on the Arctic Circle, and that was a really neat experience. If you're ever up in Rovaniemi, especially if you've got kids, you want to stop and see Santa's village. This was in June, and they had a whole bunch of great stuff. I can only imagine how fantastic it is at Christmas time. But we came into Rovaniemi, and we were shopping around, and I bought myself a Kuska cup, which I seasoned with Laka liquor, by the way. And then we did some shopping for knives, and my dad found a special brand of cheese called Koski that he just loved as a kid. So he bought 5 or 6 of those to snack on the way home. And I bought some herring. My dad found some knives that he really liked. He actually wound up buying a really nice Rosselli meat cleaver, high carbon steel, and just love that. And so I bought a pukko with a moose on it. I had looked up on their website a number of weeks before we left, and I really wanted this one that had a salmon on the handle, but they didn't have any in stock. But I got a really good one. Bought a couple other knives, and we decided to head for the airport early. So we checked our bags, got everything squared away. I didn't have any carry-ons, but my dad had a bag with some stuff, and of course he wanted that cheese with him. So we decided that we go through security and head right over to the bar. So I went through security first, got through no issues, went to the bar, ordered two beers, and sat down. My dad didn't come out right away, and I'm waiting there for a few minutes, so he didn't come out. And finally I was starting to get a little nervous after about a half an hour. Well, he finally comes charging through, and he looks pale, really upset. Sat down, and before he said a word, I said, where were you? He quaffs down almost half of that beer. I said, oh, you're not going to believe this. I said, what happened? He said, all those knives that we had, they wrapped them up in some newspaper. I thought I put them in my bag, but I didn't. I put them in my carry-on. And this Finnish security woman, after it went through the security scan, put her arm around my shoulder and said, you meant to check this bag, didn't you? In Finnish. And I responded, no, that's my carry-on. I need that with me. And she squeezed me just a little bit tighter and said, you meant to put this in with your checked baggage, right? He said, no, this is my carry-on bag. She turned the monitor around and nodded to it. My dad looked up and saw all the knives, and she said, you mean to check this bag? You don't want to take this on the airplane with you? And my dad looked, and he said, the color drained from my face. And I said, yes, ma'am, you are absolutely correct. I needed to check this, and I apologize. I totally forgot. And she kind of escorted him over while he checked his bag. he quaffed down the rest of the beer and ordered another. And he said, I love Finland, but I really don't want to see the legal end of it, and I certainly don't want to spend extra time here in a jail cell. And after a couple sips of the beer, he calmed down a little bit, and he chuckled and said, now I know what your sister feels like. More to come on that later. But we got to Helsinki, and as soon as we landed, I realized I had forgotten to schedule or get a reservation for a hotel. And my dad said, oh, I've got points. Well, it turns out that he didn't have points for any hotels that were in Helsinki. So we made some calls, and they had a spot open at one of the big hotels, and my dad said, let's stay there. I've stayed there before. I like the hotel. It's very expensive. And he said, look, you've taken care of this whole thing. Let me buy this hotel room. So we did. Had a really good dinner, more fantastic food. I think I wanted to get whitefish just because it's so delicious, especially the way the Finns prepare it. But we packed up early. That night we packed all the suitcases. We actually had to go to a department store to buy another suitcase because we had so much stuff. And we made sure all the knives were there and not in our carry-ons. And we got everything packed, and it was awesome. When my dad got on his knees, I'd never seen him do this before. He got on his knees just as he was getting ready for bed, and he looked up at me and he says, I love you, son. I said, I love you too, Dad. And he said, Rakastan sinua, Suomi. He got up, finished the rest of his kipparahanta, as we called them, put the glass down and said, good night. He put on his CPAP, this big plunger on his face, and he was out like a light. So I finished packing up and organizing everything, and we left early for the airport because we qualified to get a refund for all of that tax, the value added tax. And we were told there was a special office in the airport we had to go to fill out this form. So we did that. We got there early, and we were there before the office opened. So we're waiting and waiting, and finally this woman comes out, and she seemed a little annoyed that we were waiting, and said a couple things in Finnish. And I said, I apologize, I don't speak Finnish. Well, my dad broke in Finnish and started gyrating his hands and telling all this, and she cocked her head and said a few other things to him in Finnish, and he said a couple other things, and she really started to warm up. The real stern attitude that she had softened a lot after my dad spoke to her. And as we're filling out the forms, she said, oh, no, nope, not those forms, just a minute. And she went back and got a different form, so we had to start all over. And she needed to have copies of our receipts. We didn't know that, so we had to dig out all these receipts. And when we were finished, she put an arm around my dad and kissed him on the head and said, I hope you have a good trip. And leaned over to me and said, your dad is a sweet man, and I appreciate how polite he is. She said, I hope you guys have a great trip. Well, it took a good hour, so a lot more time than we had planned. When we got back to the check-in desk, there was a long line, and our baggage collectively was too heavy. I think it might have been $100 or something, so we paid it, and then we went very quickly to security. So I'm standing behind my dad in security, and sure enough, he gets stopped. And he started thinking, oh my gosh, I might have left one of those knives in there. So he's getting all nervous, and I was getting nervous too, but I checked everything. I knew that there wasn't anything in there. Well, the security lady pulls him aside and takes out a couple bricks of this Koski cheese and says, you can't take this on the plane. And he said, what are you talking about? It's just food. She said, no, this is a liquid. And my dad at this point was stressed out enough that we might miss the plane, and his second stop by security, he was done. And he says, okay, I'm a doctor, and I've taken a lot of science classes, and I guarantee you cheese is not a liquid. She said, yes, but you could spread it, and it's the same consistency of an explosive. And my dad says, are you kidding me? She said, no, you can't take that on the plane. So my dad said, so what? She says, I have to confiscate that. So my dad said in a very loud voice, let it be known, no terrorist is going to get past this security agent as long as they're carrying any kind of cheese. And everybody kind of chuckled. The trip was very uneventful after that. We of course got home and recounted the trip and shared the pictures and just had an absolute fabulous time recounting all the stuff. Well, my father passed away in 2019. I do miss him a lot, but having that trip to Finland and all the great experiences that I just shared really meant the world to me. My dad had said a number of times, "Hey kid, this was a trip of a lifetime," and I know he meant it because it really meant that much to me. And it means the world that you've taken a few minutes out of your day to listen to some of these stories, and I really appreciate that. I have a lot more stories to come. If you like these stories, think about hitting the like button, only if I've earned it. And if you do like these, hit the subscribe button. I have a lot more coming. There are going to be a variety of topics, and I enjoy telling these, and I hope you enjoy listening. Thanks a lot. Hey.